It's 8 o'clock.
Good morning. This is Northern Light for Monday, November 6th. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
Election day is tomorrow. We'll take a look at some of the key races in the region just ahead.
The last of the 9 Army bases originally named for Confederate generals was renamed last month.
Today marks the first redesignation in the name of black soldiers.
This will be the first Army post in the continental United States bearing the name of a Native American soldier.
And with those name changes, the Army is helping cast aside the myth of the Confederacy.
Also on the show, the history of black settlers in the Adirondacks has been sorely undertold. Amy Godine has spent years studying that history.
But what's exciting there is to discover it's because of this judge's knowledge of the black community and his work on behalf of grantees that he takes an interest in this case and wants to see the right thing happens.
We'll hear about her new book, The Black Woods, coming up ahead of her talk at the ADKX tonight. All of that and more is coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by Adirondack Experience, the museum on Blue Mountain Lake, open for holiday shopping on November 24th from 10 to 4 and online at the adkx.org. And by Apothecary Chocolates, making gourmet chocolates by hand from all natural herbs, botanicals, and tree syrups, apothecarychocolates.com.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. Election day is tomorrow, so we're taking a look at some of the key races in the region. First, Catherine Wheeler takes a look at the mayor's race in Potsdam.
Alexandra Jacobs-Wilkie is the Democrat running for Potsdam Village Mayor. She's been on the village board for about 4 years. Jacobs-Wilkie says Potsdam is facing issues ranging from economic challenges to climate change.
We need to really come together and take a look and think about how we dedicate our resources to ensure that we remain vibrant as a community.
Jacobs-Wilkie says she's thinking about Potsdam's future. That means fixing aging infrastructure and improving affordable and quality housing so the village can attract more people.
We really need to see that bigger picture. And from my standpoint, it's about getting things done. It's about transparency in local government, getting people involved in new ways, helping them understand the services that we provide.
Joseph Bowen is running as a write-in candidate for Potsdam Village Mayor. He's lived throughout the North Country in Messina and Malone and moved to Potsdam about 9 months ago.
I was speaking to community members and they felt that the village of Potsdam has such a negative cloud that they're hoping for some light. And I'm hoping that I can make a positive change to the village and implement new ideas, new strategies, and new plans.
Bowen says he's also concerned about the village's economic future. He says he wants to work on building up opportunities for the local workforce.
We actually employ our local people instead of sending, getting people from New York City or getting people from Rochester to run our hospitals, and let's keep the money local. And I think by doing that, we're going to see a growth in our economic welfare dramatically.
Potsdam town residents will also elect a new town supervisor. Democrat Marty Miller is running against 2 write-in candidates, Larissa Faulkner and Margaret Peggy Brusso. Catherine Wheeler, North Country Public Radio.
Also on the ballot tomorrow, some longtime leaders in the Adirondacks are retiring, and one town is divided over a key housing issue. Emily Russell has the details.
The town of Wilmington in the Adirondacks is divided over one of the most contentious topics in recent years, short-term rentals. According to the Adirondack Daily Enterprise, about a quarter of all homes in Wilmington are short-term rentals. The races for town supervisor and 2 seats on the town council have centered around what to do about that part of the housing market. One supervisor candidate is proposing stricter regulations and a cap on short-term rentals. The other says they need to get more public input before enacting any restrictions. There are 4 people in Wilmington running for 2 open spots on the town council. Keene also has 2 open spots on its town council with 4 candidates running, as does Lake George. Meanwhile, 2 longtime leaders won't be on the ballot next Tuesday. Tupper Lake Mayor Paul Maroon and Mariah Town Supervisor Tom Skazafava are not running for re-election. Maroon was defeated in the GOP caucus. Skazafava is retiring after leading Mariah for 3 decades. Both races only have 1 Republican candidate running for those positions. Election Day is this coming Tuesday, or you can vote early until this Sunday, November 5th. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
Voters in several North Country counties have more than 1 candidate to choose from for county clerk this year. There are contested races in Clinton, Essex, Hamilton, Warren, and Washington counties. The race for Clinton County clerk pits a longtime incumbent against his first challenger in several elections. Kara Chapman has more.
Republican John Zerlo Sr. was first elected Clinton County Clerk in 1995. He's a retired school teacher who's also served as tax collector for the town of Champlain and a county legislator. Democrat Brandy Lloyd is running against him for a 4-year term. She currently works as the Deputy Democratic Commissioner for the Clinton County Board of Elections. She previously served as the clerk and tax collector for the town of Moores. Zerlo recently told the Plattsburgh Press-Republican that the most pressing issue for his office is repairing and rebuilding survey maps that date back to the 17 and 1800s. He says he plans to apply for grant funding so the cost isn't borne by taxpayers. Lloyd told the paper she wants to address inefficiencies at the Department of Motor Vehicles. She says she wants to prioritize investment in more staff and the adoption of modern technology to improve the DMV experience. Zerlo says his office has already done what it can to achieve that. Zerlo is running on both the Republican and Conservative Party lines. Lloyd is running as the Democratic and Working Families candidate. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio.
Clinton County residents will also choose a new family court judge this election. Amy Asadorian Senecal is the current family court support magistrate. She's running on the Democratic and Working Family Party lines. Hillary Rogers is the chief assistant public defender for the county. She's running on the Republican and Conservative Party lines. Whoever wins that race will be the first woman and second person elected to the position.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 7 minutes past 8. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up, we'll hear from author Amy Godine on her new book about Black pioneers in the region. That's coming up in just a few minutes. Then to meet her in person, head over to the 80KX tonight at 7 o'clock. We'll have more details coming up in just a few minutes here on Northern Light.
Potsdam pianist Matt Bullwinkle. Northern Light is supported by the Village Mercantile, bringing Saranac Lake to places beyond the Adirondacks, offering Adirondack-made and inspired goods. VillageMerc.com, anything but general. And St. Lawrence Health, committed to keeping the community healthy and safe by providing vaccines for patients to strengthen their defenses. StLawrenceHealthSystem.org.
Canadian St. Lawrence Seaway workers ratified their new collective agreements last week. Workers' wages will now annually increase 5%, 4%, and 4%. Those are retroactive from April. The agreement also includes a $2,000 signing bonus. About 360 Canadian Seaway workers went on strike for about a week after failing to reach an agreement with the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation. Their strike shut down the Seaway. Workers have already returned to their posts.
A milk carton shortage is impacting school districts nationwide, including those across much of upstate New York. WRVO's Abby Connolly reports.
A shortage of pint-sized milk cartons is making it difficult for school districts to serve milk to students. Patrick Penfield, professor of supply chain practice at Syracuse University, says this issue started when paper factories started to go out of business due to COVID-19.
During COVID, a lot of the schools, weren't in session, and so there really wasn't any need for milk cartons. So that was one part of the supply chain. And then the actual carton producers started to go out of business and started to close down facilities.
State Senator John Mannion called on the state education department to ensure students have access to milk in schools. The education department released guidance on serving milk in schools, including pouring milk from larger containers into individual cups, offering one type of milk instead of a variety, with a last resort of not offering fluid milk altogether. Mannion says the state education department should continue to monitor the situation.
All we can ask is that in this what's called an emergency period of time, that they continue to make changes to make sure that kids are getting the nutrition that they need to be successful in school and beyond.
Tom Colabufo, the superintendent of schools at Central Square Central School District, says his district has already bought thousands of single-use cups, which students will be able to get filled with milk. Even though Central Square schools will continue to serve milk during the free breakfast and lunch, Colabufo says parents should not have to be concerned about nutrition loss.
In a way, it puts it on parents even harder, and we try to be able to alleviate, things from parents. And so they know when kids are at school that they're going to be able to get 2 meals.
For him, the shock lies more in how long the issue may last.
The big shock was last week when the New York State Education Department had also come out with the United States Department of Agriculture came out and said that this was a lot bigger than we anticipated, and we thought it would be rectified relatively soon.
Penfield says cartons may not be available until early 2024. In Syracuse, I'm Abby Connolly for North Country Public Radio.
New York is establishing a commission on the future of health care. It's an advisory body with 13 healthcare policy experts and practitioners. In a statement, Governor Hochul said the commission will make recommendations to build, quote, a resilient healthcare system that delivers every New Yorker the care they deserve. She also said that healthcare in New York and the U.S. is in a period of upheaval and transition. The commission will be looking at changes to policy, funding, and regulations.
A Jefferson County woman has been indicted on felony drug charges after a year-long state investigation. 35-year-old Tara Frederick from Adams Center was arrested with 30 other people accused of possessing and distributing drugs. Investigators seized hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of narcotics, including heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl, the deadly opioid drug.
And the Greater Glens Falls Transit System is officially merging with the larger Capital District Transportation Authority, which oversees public transport from Saratoga Springs to Albany. Glens Falls struggled to keep its bus system afloat over the last few years, particularly with a shortage of drivers during the pandemic. The city official said the merger would be beneficial for Glens Falls and Warren County residents by opening wider access to travel, including transport to rail stations and airports.
The last of the 9 Army bases originally named for Confederate generals was renamed last month. As Fort Gordon in Georgia becomes Fort Eisenhower, an entire category of memorials venerating the Confederacy will be gone. Jay Price reports for the American Homefront Project.
The bases were named for men who fought against the very army that uses them and for the right to own slaves. The new names are different. At the ceremony for the first of the 9 name changes back in March, Native American dancers and musicians were part of the ceremony as Fort Pickett in Virginia became Fort Barfoot for World War II Medal of Honor winner Van Barfoot.
This will be the first Army post in the continental United States bearing the name of a Native American soldier.
A month later, nearby Fort Lee was renamed for Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams.
Today marks the first redesignation in the name of black soldiers.
And so it went. Other bases were renamed for the first woman to win the Medal of Honor, a Hispanic Army hero, and now Eisenhower, the general who planned and led the D-Day invasion and later became president. People who did big things for their nation rather than against it. Historians say the renamings, like the removal of many Confederate statues in recent years, are part of a national return to a more accurate understanding of the Confederacy. Connor Williams was lead historian for the Federal Commission that led the renaming process.
United States soldiers had gone through this horrible conflict, and they were going to allow the Confederates back into the nation, but they were very clear that the United States Army had defeated treason, and that it was not the North and the South. It was the U.S. Army versus this domestic insurrection. And so by changing these bases, we're just getting back to the reality as it was in 1870 and 1890.
A time before the organized effort, he says, to portray the Confederate cause as noble and the soldiers in gray as equivalent to those in blue. Around the beginning of the 20th century, groups, notably the United Daughters of the Confederacy, began promoting the lost cause myth that made heroes of Confederate leaders and blamed the war on Northern aggression rather than slavery. They paid for hundreds of memorials to bolster their case. Meanwhile, the Army, as it rushed to build bases in World War I, decided to name those in the North for Union officers and those in the South for Confederates, preferably those with short names to reduce clerical work.
I think the fact that you could even use the names of people who made war against the United States of America for the cause of slavery and white supremacy as military bases shows the success of the propaganda campaign of the United Daughters of the Confederacy and other groups.
Rivka Maislish is a senior research analyst at the Southern Poverty Law Center.
It's going to take a very thorough pushback to rectify the situation, and it's certainly a step forward to rename those bases.
History professor Susan Crane at the University of Arizona studies how people engage with the past. She cautions against conflating the past with history, which is how people decide to portray the past. Memorials, she says, are like history in that they're crafted to preserve and highlight a specific memory or meaning.
Learning history is always the practice of making choices of what we pay attention to, what we think is more important or not. So it becomes a big ethical, moral question. What are we choosing to pay attention to? And how does that reflect our values?
Williams says how the nation views the Confederacy and slavery has obviously shifted in recent decades, something he could gauge during the renaming process as he visited base communities.
I would give a talk to 75 people. 2 of them would make very loud and vociferous protests, but 73 would nod their heads or be okay with it.
And so now, rather than slave owners, Klan leaders, and Confederate Army generals, the nation is using the bases to commemorate Americans like Eisenhower, Barfoot, Gregg, and Adams. I'm Jay Price, reporting.
This story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration that reports on American military life and veterans.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. In just a minute, author Amy Godine takes a look at the history of Black pioneers in the Adirondacks. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note, forecasting bird migration, coming up at 8:42. But first, Todd has a look at the weather for us.
Mostly cloudy, highs near 50 today, winds out of the east-northeast, 10 to 15 miles per hour. Tonight, lows in the 40s and windy with rain showers likely. About a 70-80% chance of some rain tonight and throughout the day again tomorrow. Highs near 50 on Tuesday. Cooler on Wednesday, partly cloudy with highs in the 30s. And a chance of showers again on Thursday and Friday with highs in the 40s. We have clouds, 32 degrees in Canton right now.
The history of Black settlers in the Adirondacks has been sorely undertold. Author Amy Godine has spent years studying that history, and when she started curating an exhibit for John Brown Lives, an Adirondack-based social justice group, she thought her research would maybe result in a short pamphlet. Instead, it became a 500-page tome called The Black Woods. She joined Mitch Teich on the Northwards podcast to discuss the book, which explores the history of Black pioneers who came to the Adirondacks to forge a future for their families.
I think if you asked most people if they knew anything about Black pioneers in this region, they might know something about John Brown and his role in advancing Black opportunity. But the name they'd know less about is a guy that's really kind of at the center of your book or near the center of your book. What should people know about Gerrit Smith?
Oh, he was a remarkable guy, and he's the reason that John Brown came here. He is the one who developed a plan to settle 3,000 Black New Yorkers in the Adirondacks. It was that plan and the promise of helping out the settlers on their land that John Brown came to the Adirondacks in the first place. Smith was a radical abolitionist of enormous land wealth who lived in Peterborough, New York, and he met John Brown, who came to him and said, I want to help. Smith launches Brown, and Brown is enticed by the presence of the settlers who are here. Brown comes here because they're here. He doesn't lead the settlement, as so many historians have suggested. He comes in response to a small settlement that's already in place.
You know, one of the keys to having land at the time was a requirement that people had to own land valued at least $250 to be able to vote in the state of New York.
That's right. Black people were subjected to that racialized voting requirement in 1821. And this effectively disenfranchises an entire Black electorate that some people, especially in the city, were worried would damage pro-slavery business interests in the city. That's one reason why the opposition to it was so fervently pursued by urban New Yorkers. And it isn't reversed, or lifted rather, until 1870, when the feds insist on absolute equality before the law for Black voters. That's the first time. It takes that long. So it's in play a long time in New York State. And New York State does not willingly go for this. It's really imposed on the New York Assembly by the feds, and then later New York embraces it.
This would be surprising to a lot of people who think of everything north of the Mason-Dixon line as being pretty egalitarian towards former slaves and free Blacks.
I think you're right. I think that's one of the revelations of the story, that this was really a story. I won't say it wasn't about slavery, because the links between the beneficiaries who were free Black New Yorkers when they got their land and slavery, which was in their own past experience. Many of them were born slaves. Many of them were self-emancipated people. Many of them were parented by free slaves. It was so tight, it's virtually porous. And so historians who have claimed, as some have, this was strictly for free Black New Yorkers, slavery had nothing to do with it, missed the boat in this respect. And those who have insisted, and many have, this was just for runaways, this was for fugitives, also missed the boat. There was intercourse between those two worlds, and it was evident in every family I looked at.
What was the historical record like for some of these families?
The best stories came from archival sources that aren't digitized and weren't well known, looking at discrete pension records, military pension records after the Civil War for sons of grantees and grantees who served. There were some fantastic revelations in legal records in county archives of court cases involving grantees or their children. One guy he spent 2 months in prison in E-Town, the county seat, because he owed money for a horse he'd bought from a white guy up in a town I forget, and it died as soon as he got it home. So he didn't pay up, and the sheriff turns up, arrests him, takes him back to the county jail. He's sentenced to 3 months. He's in his, I think, 50s, 60s at the time, and he's alone with his wife on their farm. The only way he gets out early is when a white judge in Elizabethtown learns of this case and writes the attorney for the other fellow and says, this is an outrage. This guy has to be released at once. There was no justice in this case at all. He didn't get a hearing. He didn't get a lawyer. You didn't serve him notice. And he does get released, but he doesn't get compensation for his months in jail. So full justice is not achieved. But what's exciting there is to discover it's because of this judge's knowledge of the Black community and his work on behalf of grantees that he takes an interest in this case and wants to see the right thing happens.
Amy Godine is the author of The Black Woods, Pursuing Racial Justice on the Adirondack Frontier. She spoke with Mitch Teich on the Northwards podcast. Find the full conversation at ncpr.org/northwards. Godine will join Mitch for another conversation tonight at the ADKX at 7 o'clock in Blue Mountain Lake.
Time is coming up on 26 minutes past 8, and you're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. Just want to remind you that coming up on this weekend, there's a concert in Saranac, and it features Interwoven Ensemble. Sunday at 3 in the afternoon at Saranac Methodist Church. That's on Route 3 in Saranac. It's being presented by Hill and Hollow Music. This is an exciting young group, Interwoven Ensemble, and I'm going to share just a sample of some of their music, and you can check it out on YouTube and also on their website, interwoven.com, interwovenmusic.com. And this is a piece called Fiddle Suite by Chen Yi. Music featuring Interwoven, the New York-based intercultural ensemble integrating traditional Asian music and Western classical music, and they'll be performing Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock, Saranac Methodist Church in Saranac, New York. Doors open at 2:30.
So many events going on throughout the region, including right now in Saranac Lake at the Adirondack Artists Guild Art Gallery. The new exhibit is called Kiwasa Skies and features the paintings of Meg Bernstein. You can find out more from AdirondackArtistsGuild.com.
Also want to remind you, coming up on Saturday, next Saturday, Bill McKibben and Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr. will be presenting together 3 o'clock at the Paul Smith College Vic. It's a presentation titled Hotter Planet, Hotter Politics. Bill McKibben is founder of Bill McKibben is founder of Third Act, which organizes people over the age of 60 for action on climate and justice. And Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr. is the president and CEO of Hip Hop Caucus, a minister and community activist and one of the most influential people in hip hop political life. The lecture is free for Paul Smith's College students and students at North Country Community College. And the general public asked for a $5 donation. You can reserve a seat on the website paulsmithsvic.org. That's Bill McKibben and Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr. presenting a program entitled Hotter Planet, Hotter Politics this Saturday, 3 o'clock at the Paul Smiths College Vic.
That music does signal that it is the end of the show. Morning Edition continues in just a minute. Then join us at lunchtime today for a conversation with filmmaker Sofia Coppola on her new film Priscilla. It explores the love affair and age difference between Elvis and Priscilla Presley. Plus, hear behind-the-scenes stories from Coppola's 30 years in the movie business. That conversation at lunchtime today right here on North Country Public Radio. Until tomorrow, I'm Monica Sandreski.
I'm Todd Moe. Be well.